All right, well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. This is really exciting that we have a panel here today. It's all about litigation. It's about jobs in litigation, and it's information for you students going forward and looking forward to your career in litigation. So obviously, I've just said the word litigation 5 times in these first 2 sentences, so I couldn't be more excited as the litigation director to be moderating here tonight. I'm going to go light on the introductions of our panelists and allow them to do some of the introductions themselves upon their first answer, because I know for the students, you guys want to get to some of the questions I have, asking some of your own questions, and really just starting to hear from our panelists. The brief version is going from your right towards me. This is Buzz Hines. He's a partner at Farrell, Ron & Martel here in town, GGU graduate, practices in environmental law. Our friends in the environmental law clinic said to say hi. They were bubbling the fact that you were here participating in this panel. Next, from Chartres Friese, a firm right down the street, is Zara Chan, and she's a litigation partner and a member of the firm's security enforcement group. So we have environmental covered, we have some of our enforcement and regulatory practices with securities covered, and you'll see how there's going to be differences with the areas of practice and what's hot and what's not with some of the answers that come from the panelists. And lastly, Paul Henderson, near me now, is currently in the Deputy Chief of Staff role for Public Safety for the Mayor of San Francisco, and before that, near and dear to my heart, a prosecutor for a number of years and a Deputy District Attorney. So obviously we'll get some of the criminal side, some of the policy side, and the behind the scenes in politics. I want to get right to some of the questions on behalf of the students that we have for you, and it's really for our students, it's looking forward to litigation internships, litigation post-bar positions, and then eventually careers and jobs in litigation, and how we can best fit ourselves. So I'll start, Paul, with you, if you don't mind.
Sure.
What are, you have someone that's close to you, you have a relative, you have a friend of the family who's thinking about law school. What advice are you giving them at the front, knowing that, hey, they're going to want to end up in one of these litigation positions coming out of school?
Well, the advice, and this is really easy for me. My little brother just graduated from law school in May and is interested in litigation, so I'm an old hand giving advice that sometimes doesn't get listened to, but that's another story. You know, I always tell people, specifically law students and undergrads, about the power of litigation in terms of being able to craft and develop a skill that allows them to go into any number of areas that may have had perceptions of limitations, specifically with students of color and with women, about having a measured skill set that you bring to the table that independently defines what your abilities can be. And I think that is so empowering when you can walk into a room and you don't have to like the color of my skin or my sexual orientation or know who my parents are or know what school I went to, but I can show you a set of skills that is measured and defined, that articulates for you that I am successful in an area, because when you walk into a courtroom, one of us is going to be more persuasive, one of us is going to be a better advocate, and one of us is going to have an independent measure of skills and abilities that translate into success for this profession. And so I really get excited about litigation because I also think that it's one of the things that people can empower themselves with, even as students, to show aptitude early on while they're students when they start looking for a job, and then as they're developing a career. And it's something that is a learned skill that I think a lot of people have the potential for if they're open to it and they're looking for those opportunities.
Cesar, I'll kind of related question going to you next. You know, you have someone that's going to apply for a position, whether it's an internship or post-bar or a permanent position, that you know they're going to be part, at least in some small way, of a litigation team working on your matters. What's going to stand out on the resume in their experience by way of externships and courses they take? What are you looking for when you're culling through those piles of resumes?
You know, to follow up on what Paul has mentioned, I think that what we're looking for and what many firms are looking for is a track record of achievement, hard work. And that's a reflection of what it is that you put into your own professional life. You know, if you've been going to school and working jobs, if you've been going to school at night, if you've been doing very well, or handling other personal or family issues, that should be somewhat reflected in what the resume says. So what we're looking for is a record of achievement. We're looking for people who show that they work hard, that they're can-do, hit-the-ground-running types of people. I think something gets lost in the metrics as well, which is I think that a lot of law firms and organizations in general are also looking for good people, So don't lose sight of the fact that during the interview process that you shouldn't be saying the same thing to everyone, because the people that are interviewing you will also talk. And to the extent that you're giving inconsistent answers or your answers are the same for everyone, that doesn't actually reflect perhaps who you are. You should really allow yourself to be the hardworking, colorful, interesting adult that you all have become, you all are here. And let that flow through. One of the things that I also am very adamant about, I'm on the recruiting committee of my own firm, is I don't like to ask questions on the resume. I find that to be a little bit too predictable. So what I want to do is I want to ask something a little off the resume, something unexpected, and as in my interview process, I'd like to see the wheels turn. I don't necessarily think there's a good answer or a bad answer, but if I ask you a question that's a little unexpected, I want to see your wheels turn. And I want to see whatever answer you give me. And that may be some little small item that's on the resume, or it could be my listening skills. Whatever you've said, I ask a follow-up question. So be prepared for that. And again, you should be sincere, give a good presentation, be poised, and allow the kind of multi-dimensional self really reflect in the interview.
And a related question, just to follow up, just because you said you're on the committee and you're looking for these materials, how often can the cover letter be an opportunity to sort of spark some of those conversations with you, or give you the idea to ask a question or present why they're a good person in that matrix?
I will tell you that the cover letters are read. And it's not so much what you say, but it should be well organized, shouldn't be too long. And make sure you do your research, because as people read your cover letters, they will note if you have focused on an area of practice that actually is not on the website, that is actually not a major practice area for the firm. And I can't emphasize this enough, which is typos actually get noticed. And it happens even if you spell check, I understand it, but from a standpoint of just presentation, it shows a little bit of sloppiness. And it can be overlooked, but at the same time, you really need to review your letters carefully, just like you would review the legal work for a client.
Can I articulate something? Because
Please.
this is, you raised an important issue.
Yeah, we're going to try to see how long we can go without letting those talk.
I just raised an issue that
Save the best for last.
It's really important. So, like, at the district attorney's office here in San Francisco, when I was chair and head of the hiring and recruiting, and we saw a lot of resumes and a lot of cover letters, and the wait list had over 3,000 people to interview. But it's exactly as you said in terms of the committees that are reviewing those letters. They are actually looking for those typos to eliminate and screen people out that weren't careful, that wrote a letter to Dear Mrs. Henderson. There's always in those big red circles about who is Mrs. Henderson? Or it's like, it's been my dream to be a prosecutor in Alameda County. You got the letter right. Clearly you have sent this to other people, but it's the little mistakes like that. And just as she said with the spell check, you're not necessarily going to catch everything. But I always tell students, empower yourselves. Go to your career services and say, this is the cover letter that I'm going to be using. Can you review this? Can you look at this? Have someone else put eyes on the documents that you're going to send out. because it's the little mistakes like that, specifically when you are applying to jobs that seem flashy or jobs where you know there's going to be a lot of competition, where if they can screen you out in the beginning, it happens more often than not. If you really do care about that position, you really should care about your cover letter and about your resume that you're sending in, because it actually is the first opportunity that that potential employer has to review your background, education, training, skills, and experience, and you want that first step to be a good one, because oftentimes it defines whether or not that door is open or closed for you. So.
And going off of that, Buzz, so we understand that our students, they are applying lots of different places in
Right.
lots of different directions. How important is it when they get that opportunity, they're sitting across the desk from you, they're talking about a position, whether it be a summer internship or a permanent job, how important is it for them to know your field, know a good answer to why do you want to work here at Varela? What, you know, how important are those?
Oh, I think it's critical, and I think all the things that Paula and Sarah are saying, it resonates in that moment where when you're sitting across the table from somebody, you've actually done the research, and as interviewers, we really appreciate that. It's not at all an egotistical thing. I think it demonstrates the kinds of sort of characteristics that any entity, law firm, public agency, governmental agency, you name it, all those folks are looking for particular qualifications, and people who do their research, people who are able to sort of connect their interests with what you might be interested in. I think, you know, those are huge qualities, and what happens typically when you've done that is the flow of the conversation is much, much better. It's not stilted.
It's dynamic.
It's dynamic. You're not just talking about things on the resume. You're actually talking about things of interest to you, and when you do that, you engage, and you become a little bit more lively, you move your hands around, you're making eye contact, and those are all the things that resonate with interviews and interviewers, and that, you know, that get you noticed. I would make one other, just since we were on the topic of cover letters, always tailor them. Don't send the same one, because sometimes you'll run into the situation that Paul has referred to, where you have a ray line that says something different than maybe what it should. And then the other thing is, we have a tradition at our partner retreats where the 10th anniversary as a partner is celebrated, and you get a clock, and it's kind of a cool thing. And I cannot tell you how many times the cover letter because Varela is one of these places, I came in 2000 laterally, but Varela is one of these places where people come to summer associates and they work their whole career. So it's hysterical when this cover letter is pulled out. And sometimes they don't always follow the kinds of things that we're talking about here, so there might be a typo or just a funny little thing. So you never know when it's going to turn back up. These things are kept.
Getting to that next stage, when you finally get one of these opportunities, you get the green light, you're coming to join an office. Again, even if it's just the first day and it's a temporary opportunity, it's a summer gig, it's an internship during the year, as we have with a lot of our students. What do we have to start thinking of, particularly in this litigation context, of how we're going to impress our supervisors, how we're going to sort of make ourselves known, have it be a positive experience for the student? And I'll throw it to anyone who's in the mood to answer rather than go in forced order.
I can define it. People ask me this all the time. The DA's office, while I was there, had about 350 interns a year. Law students, undergrads, high school students, and how do you stand out in an environment like that? And I will tell you, the solution is to be independently responsible. So you're always, and I think in any job environment, looking for the individuals that stand out and that are intellectually engaged in the process as they are getting assignments, that they are looking to do more than just wait for you to tell them what to do, that are thinking about issues and willing to take that extra step to be engaged and showing interest in whatever the assignment is. And this is something that I talk to the law students in particular about at the beginning of the summer. It's like, look, you have 3 months. Fool me. You can do anything for 3 months and appear engaged and interested, because the recommendations from this office or any office where you work actually does matter. It's a very small legal community, regardless of what city you're going to, and people do talk, and so that when you have an outstanding student, when you have someone with superior skills that are clearly evident by the work that they've done for you, that's the information that gets around. And you want, I always looked and approached those jobs when I had opportunities with jobs. I wanted it to be so that when I left, they felt like, how can we continue doing this job without Paul here? Because he was doing all of this stuff for me. And you know, I would do little things like try and find out beforehand, talking to both students that had been there in the past and talking to staff that worked there, the little cheats and the back doors about what do you think they're really looking for? What do you think really stands out at this agency and in these positions? And you'll hear stuff like, you know, the secretaries will tell you like, oh, we had problems last summer because some of the law clerks that were here wouldn't come in on the weekends and they would complain and go home early in the evenings. Okay, I hear you. When I come in that first week, I want to know, is there a pass so that if we're working late and we can stay? Oh, and you can see people with you, right? Oh, wants to stay, will work late. Is there a weekend pass when we have projects that we can finish? I mean, it's always giving. I think you have to put your extra first step. You have to put extra effort into that first step, and when you define who you are and you're making your first impressions in jobs, because that stuff really does stand out. You have to be engaged in what the process is, and I think the biggest mistake that I see in students, in law clerks, and in interns is that they come and they expect you to just tell them, and then I did everything they told me to do. Why didn't they select me? There's more to it than that. I'm going to give you things to do. You will have assignments, but I want you to be asking questions and be engaged in what those assignments are, because, and not just with me, but the people around me, because that makes them feel as though you are doing the job that you are passionate about and you care about, and they want you to stay there to continue doing work with them and for them in their environment. And then those are the people that will fight for you to get your job when you're applying or when it comes time to make decisions about who stands out with the work. I mean, obviously the work's important too, but I like to tell people this is how you should mentally prepare for the opportunity when you've got an internship, when you've got a law clerkship, when you've got a post-bar clerkship, when they are all but telling you, this is the pathway, we have identified you, this is your opportunity, this is your chance, you've got to do it. Seize the day, take the job, and do it well.
And by contrast, in the firms, you know, where it may not be that you have dozens of files where you're willing to say, hey, take a shot at this 995 or this motion that's going on. You know, when they're doing sort of more internal memorandum, when it's more discrete issues that you're sending them out to sort of report back to you with, you know, how can they, again, impress you with how they take your direction, how they ask questions at the front end, and sort of run with the assignment you've given them and give you something that you can actually use coming back.
You know, what I would say is if you're working in a private law firm, understand that it is a business, and the work that you're doing is actually going to be billed clients. So one of the things that you should be proactive about is trying to understand what the nature of the assignment is. Sometimes, and there are various levels as a practical matter. You know, in law school you learn how to do the survey memo, you know, which is what is the current state of the law. There may be opportunities in a private law firm when the purpose is something very different, which is I am using it as an advocacy piece. Okay, I am expecting that the work product you're giving me is going directly into a brief. You have to ask questions about what the nature of the assignment is. Sometimes I don't want either. I don't want a lot of written product. All I want is some focused cases on the issue, good and bad, and I want you to highlight them, and I want you to talk to me, okay? So you have to understand kind of what does the lawyer or what does the team want from you? Is it an objective piece? Is it an advocacy piece? And you know, beware that if it's an advocacy piece, you want to warn the team or the lawyer that you're looking for, if there's something out there that's significant they may see from the other side. That's helping you to help them, okay? And you know, I've had young lawyers give me pieces and they'll tell me, you know, there are a couple of these other cases that are distinguishable, but you may want to read them. Fantastic, because you are not only being responsive about the project, but you're being proactive. You're telling me what I need to know, you're helping me, okay? All of that is very worthwhile. I also like the approach of just, following up with people, I think Paul hit upon this as well, which is just being reactive is not being the best advocate for your brand, okay? As you start a new position, you are your brand, okay, for that position, whether it be in the public sector or in the private sector. And you want to make a good impression, you want the first impression. It's always easier to start out with a good impression than to have maybe a little bit of a mixed reputation and then build it up, okay? So your first impression should be that, you're hardworking, that you're bright, that you are engaged, that you're interested in trying to help the team or the lawyer that you're working with. And that should be your brand. And as you move along, you should continue to try to develop that. And the fundamentals we're learning right here, which is being good lawyers, being smart lawyers, working hard on learning the law. That's stuff that is just the building blocks for being a good lawyer. And the other things are kind of the multidimensional part of being a professional. The presence, the poise, just trying to be hopeful and engaged and understanding what you're trying to do to help the clients with their goals. So, my hint is, pay attention to little things, and without being a pest, but, make sure that you check in with people and ask questions and actively look like, you do want to know what's going on. You want to be helpful. You want to learn more. You want to get more responsibility, all of those things.
And Buzz, so even in your narrow field, so you're in environmental, you have an environmental associate or summer associate that's assigned to the team, whether by rotation or they're going to be there for the summer. How much do we take, they ask the question, I always sort of offer to students, sometimes it's a lonely existence when you're the only one looking at the file, the only one dealing with these issues, and to have someone who shows an interest. I think that's what a lot of us are saying here. How do we balance that against your time and finding the right opportunities, knowing that you're a busy person and you don't want the intern or the summer associate in your office all the time asking ground-up questions, but you do want to have them show the interest.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a challenge because I know from the standpoint of the new hire or the more junior associate, it can be intimidating and just challenging to walk into a partner's office who either you perceive as being busy or who really is busy. And sometimes there's a difference. And you don't want to bother that person. And so I think you have to take cues from people. And I think part of it goes back to the original question about what you're looking for in a firm and what firms and organizations are looking for. And a lot of that comes back to people. I know we like to hire people who we like to be around. They obviously need to be smart, careful, good lawyers also. So I think a lot of it is just that ability to kind of take cues in terms of the relationship that you're trying to build with the people who you're working with. And sometimes it's going to be a little bit easier than others. We at Farella, we have a rotation system, and so as an environmental practitioner, I don't have the benefit of identifying an environmental lawyer who the environmental department wants to hire for the summer. We have a pool of lawyers and they rotate. And this summer I had a great experience with a 2L because the week that he was with me, I had a lot of interesting stuff going on. That's not always the case. I mean, he hit it on a perfect week. There were meetings outside the office. There were, some district attorney's investigations that were getting kind of hot and heavy. So he was able to walk around with me and go to these meetings and also able to interact with other people, both within the firm and outside the firm. So that was a really good experience, and I think it goes back to what I was saying, because he was able, from those experiences, kind of gauge what my style is. And do I want to talk more about this? Am I going to be more effusive about this? Is this a good time to talk? And he was really good about just sort of knowing those things. And it goes back to make one other point about this sort of issue. I think the thing that became very clear to me, and that I still think about now, even though I've been practicing for almost 30 years, there's sort of two clients. There's the client that you're billing, the corporate entity, the individuals, the people within the organization who you're working with. But then there's also, you've got clients that are within the firm or within the different, another agency within the city of San Francisco and county of San Francisco. And you should never lose sight of that. And I think sometimes as, when we practice for a while, you almost forget about that. Well, we have this great wine country practice, and it sort of dawned on me a few years ago that I ought to be doing more work with those folks. So I didn't target clients, I targeted my colleagues, my partners, people who work in that office. And as a result, I have a lot more wine country business. Now, it's very substantively oriented on water law and environmental issues, but I think it's just an important point to make to you. I think it dovetails with a lot of what Paul and Cesara have said. And it's just that recognition that your client group is not who you would ordinarily just perceive as your client. It's sometimes other folks and other people to whom you can draw on both experience and work.
And it's not going to be the same for every person. I think you have to be engaged because it is a dynamic experience, and how you connect with me at work might be different than how you connect with her at work. And
Right.
so when you're looking for those opportunities, you have to be adaptable. And it may be that I'm not busy at around 10 o'clock in the mornings, but it may be that she would prefer a memo or something that she could read, that you could send her outlining, hey, I have a couple of questions when you get a chance, I'd love to talk to you about the following. You have to be adaptable to things like that, but you only become adaptable when you're engaged. And I like to give specific examples so people know what I'm talking about. I can tell you there's nothing more frustrating to me than towards the end of a summer, or towards the end of a semester, or at the end of a clerkship or a fellowship, when someone is saying to me in the last week or on their last day, what do I do about getting hired? Would you want me to tell you in the next like 6 hours now what to do about getting hired? One of the things I always ask people is like, well, tell me a little bit about our hiring practice. Tell me a little bit about the people that are on the hiring committee. And I can tell you that it is question time over when they tell me, like, I was hoping that you would tell me. You've been here for 6 months, for 3 months, for a year. You haven't even identified who is on the hiring committee and gotten to know those people or made sure that they understand your skill set, or you've reached out to them. It's very difficult and challenging, and I think we're all speaking about that. There is no one set model, but there is a model, and the model is to be proactive and to be dynamic and be engaged in both the work and the organization, whatever it is, where you're trying to find employment or develop a successful career.
Now, crawling into the heads of my students, what I know they're thinking is that you go halfway through a panel like this and they hear a lot of that you should do this and you should do that. And it's always important for us to sort of think about it. I'm one question away from thinking about what's the thing that sort of turns off the faucet? What's the thing I'm spending my time in a law office, whether it's a government office, whether it's a private firm, and an assignment came to me and it didn't work out so well, and then the workflow dries up. What happens there? What should I watch out for? What's the pitfall? So before we get to start thinking about that, what's the kind of horror stories out there that you can share with us as to what we do not want to be when we show up at your office? But the last one, I just thought of this on your last answer, is this whole idea of specialization. And we have lots of students that ask questions of us all the time. Do I have to, on the government side, criminal work? If I work for a PD in one semester, I mean I'm forever labeled a defense person. If I've taken this class and I enjoy securities enforcement as I do, should I only be looking for those jobs? What is your stance, whether it's in the firm or about specialization?
I don't think it's even necessarily my stance. I think Cesara and others would say the same thing. We're looking for good people, and it's hard to put just a label on that. If you can articulate your reasoning for how and why you've done things in the past and what you drew from those experiences, that's the money answer. And I think when I'm talking to students or I'm talking to people that are doing post-bar experiences, the things I want to know from them is I want to see a record of, or I want to hear them be able to articulate to me what their passion is, what is driving them, and how they translated that passion into a measured amount of success. I started off doing defense work, working for the NAACP and the Legal Defense Fund. My mother is a public defender. No one clapped for me when I decided I'm going to go to the DA's office. Right. That sounds like the district attorney's office. That's what it sounded like you said. But the reality of it was, and you know, when I got out of school a while ago, you know, it wasn't during a great economy. And, you know, I didn't go to school in California. I was coming from Louisiana. And I'd love to tell you that I was at the top of my class, but I was not. I know we're all going to be friends here, so we can share all of this when we hang out on Facebook and stuff. But I can tell you, you know, I had 24 job offers, and part of what allowed me to have so many job offers was litigation, having a measured set of skills that I could show and articulate to the firms and to the agencies where I was interested in, that I had been to court and argued and made appearances over 200 times as a student by taking positions throughout my academic career where I was certified and was proactive about those positions about, look, I'd love to do a trial. No one's going to let you do a murder trial. It's interesting when I'm talking lawsuit. They're like, I'd like to work in homicide. Really? Thank you. With your 3 semesters of law school, you're not going to get a homicide. But I appreciate the engagement for people that are actively engaged and want to go to court. And as I would roam up the halls, oh, you got a dentist appointment? I can make an appearance for you. You just need a continuance? Let me go ask for the continuance. You've got a motion to argue that someone else has written? I'll argue it for you. I'd like to write my own. But you develop a skill set and you have a marked measurement of skills that are transferable to a number of firms and agencies when you can articulate, listen, I've got a familiarity in the courtroom. I feel like I'm a strong communicator. And this isn't just me and my opinion. This is what I've done while I've been in school. This is what I've done while I've had these jobs to show you and articulate to you how you can measure my potential success with your agency, your firm, your practice, whatever it's going to be. And I think things like that are really important. And they open the door, specifically when you're talking about litigation, because you do have the opportunities to be articulate and to argue things and to present yourself well. And oftentimes that only happens when you have an interview situation and that's your shot. So you don't want to blow it. You really want to be prepared for those interviews, and they can be defining for you when you're talking about developing and cultivating an opportunity. I don't even remember your question.
Specialization.
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think with litigation, yeah, the skills of litigation, I think, open the door across the board, and you aren't really limited.
What you're saying is music to my ears. That's
Right.
why I just like,
Well, and I think it resonates, and you know, part of it is because I went to Golden Gate, and one of the great defining features of the school was clinical programs back in the 80s.
Exactly.
And I think to Paul's point, you know, I have a specialization. It's in environmental law, which is, you know, taken on a much broader rubric than it really was in the 1980s. But I think what, you know, if you're a litigator / trial lawyer, what really defines you is the courtroom. And what defines you is your ability to be an advocate and your ability to be passionate. So if you can be passionate as to a particular substantive area, that's great. And if that area can keep you busy enough within a law firm setting or an agency setting or some other setting, then that's great. But I think for civil litigation and for a lot of the way that law firms are set up, ours included, with just a general business litigation group as one of its practice areas, you don't necessarily have to specialize. And I think one of the things that a lot of, you know, trial lawyers will tell you is that, you know, they're the jack of all trades, master of none, and there's nothing better than learning about something new. For those of us who have specialized, you know, I enjoy those things that take me out of my comfort zone, but it's usually going to be in my substantive area just because I've been doing it so long. And the way most firms are set up now is along a practice group model as opposed to being sort of corporate and litigation, which is the old one.
Let me add a comment to this for the private law firm context, which is, you know, specialization is a concept that really can't be discussed without some thought about a development continuum. You know, when you're a young lawyer, your main job is learning the law, doing a good job at legal analysis and researching and writing and developing all those skills you need just in the basic, you know, blocking and tackling. As your career continues, I think you'll find just a natural inclination of cases that you like, subject matters that you like. For example, in my case, before law school, I was an investment banker. And not surprisingly, the concept, the financial concepts, securities markets, the lexicon, just knowing the language, the vocabulary was all very helpful. And I continue to find it interesting today, you know, reading the Wall Street Journal and looking at the markets and just seeing, you know, the vast amount of money that is changing hands on a daily basis. So I think a number of lawyers will gravitate towards certain topics, okay? I put a little note for the future for those of you that are interested in private practice, which is that I hear from clients and from other panelists, a very common denominator is that clients want to hire specialists, okay? So if Paul is out there on a particular type of matter, it's an environmental matter, he's looking for a specialist in that area, not a generalist. And it also is an area to watch out for in your client development. Again, if you're interested in private practice, because that's a component now in private law firms. And, you know, if you're going to spend time on learning an area, spending time with others that are interested in that area, it might actually behoove you to actually enjoy that area a little bit. So, because, you know, last time I looked, there were 24 hours in a day, and if you can combine some of these things, it's an efficient and more enjoyable use of your time. You know, you're hanging out with people that are interesting to not only your business life, but also your personal life. It's a good way to kind of, you know, use that time productively, you know. So I would look out for that. And that's not to say that you can't, you know, be a generalist and work either in the public sector or in the private sector. But, you know, something to pay attention to and take into consideration as you look at your own career and your career life. Maybe you want to think about that.
I actually think too that it helps you as you are developing to understand what exactly your skill set is. When there are subject matters that you particularly enjoy or you have an interest in, that's always so much more helpful, and it really does come across when you're interviewing and you're talking about the subject matter that you're focusing on. I can say and articulate, as I feel like I end up being more of a generalist just in my role now with the city especially, where I do a lot of public safety stuff, but anything and everything comes across my desk, and I'm expected to be the lawyer or give legal advice oftentimes about very esoteric subject matter. You know, I just have to scramble quickly to try and figure a lot of things out. But I have a skill set based in litigation that allows me, and you will learn this particularly when you are a trial lawyer, issues come up all the time that you, as no matter how prepared you are, oh, I did not expect that. And we're going to be discussing it tomorrow morning. Or you get a motion that suddenly has to be argued that you didn't write, that's a handoff, or some unexpected issue comes up that the judge may ask you about, and you have to move very quickly. I'm the on-air analyst for CBS as their legal expert. Most of the time, I have less than half an hour before I go on air to talk about really complicated stuff sometimes. But the foundation of that, or what I use always, are my skill set that I developed as a trial lawyer and my litigation skills to bring something with a presentation that at least sounds articulate and can cover some of the more interesting issues that come up frequently. And I think you have to be adaptable in you know, because all of us are litigators, you know, and I always say and feel like litigation is the highest form of lawyering because of that adaptability that you have to have, even when you have a specialization. Just because I practiced in criminal law for so long, there are subtleties in criminal law that I hadn't anticipated, because it's all based on facts and circumstances and clients and partners and the way issues are presented to you. So you have to be adaptable to those things. And I think we're all saying the same thing, but I firmly believe that it is a great foundation of adaptability by its very nature, litigation. So,
And Buzz, I think those two answers are too good a segue not to go, not where I promised, but go to a different question, which is, there are only 24 hours in a day, and you have to try to combine it, and you have to try to figure out what's of interest. How can a professional organization, how can getting together with committees and sections of bar associations and other professional associations, how can they get you together outside of your firm with people that are like-minded and have these type of experiences and form these type of bonds?
Yeah, so this is a bit of a plug for the ABA and getting involved in this section of litigation, and we're unabashed about it. But I think there's a couple of things, and as law students, I mean, one of the things you're trying to do is to network and to identify people who can be of assistance to you, and frankly, who you can be of assistance to as well, and meet those people and connect with them. And so that's, I think, something that an organization, be it Bar Associations of San Francisco or the American Bar Association or the various other bar foundations and bar groups that are in San Francisco that might be associated with along ethnicity lines and a variety of other things. These are fantastic organizations to get involved in based on the people, and then also based on some of the experience that they can provide you. You know, Wes mentioned committees. Well, the litigation section is highly bureaucratic, but it's organized into these different divisions, and the substantive committees are substantive. There's environmental litigation, there's energy, there's employment. Well, if you've sort of identified a couple of things that you're interested in, those give you an opportunity to write, to be involved in websites, to be able to go to conferences. So on a substantive level, those are great. Procedurally, there's different committees that might be associated with pretrial practice, with expert witnesses, those types of things. And then on a more, on a slightly different level, there's young advocates. There's other programs that are more designed around where you are in your career path. And so you might be around other people who are of a similar either age or a similar part where you're coming out of law school, similar geographic area. So there's a lot of affinities that might be developed through that. So I think as a component to part of what we're talking about, which is to develop experience, develop sort of a path forward in terms of not only that first job, but a succession of jobs, that pathway basically. I think professional organizations are a very important part of that. To the point about there's only so many hours in a day, there's a selection process. Not every bar association or every group is going to be what you find to be most useful, and so there's a selection process that you'll go through. And I think when you do identify a group that you enjoy being with, that you get professional benefits out of, and that you have a collegiality associated with those people who might become your friends, who you see on a regular basis, those are the ones that you kind of stick with.
Yeah, and I think that's the issue on behalf of students. Their perspective is, I have to go to, I'm going to a function, I'm going to a conference. I don't know anyone at this conference. The idea that these are going to become your friends, that there are mentors in the group, that there are like-minded folks that have these And you can have conversations that are outside of your assignment and outside of your workload. Other thoughts about professional organizations or other ways to get with these like-minded folks and have these type of connections and opportunities?
You know, I think that a lot of these bar association groups or community groups, I think it's a win-win. I mean, from the standpoint of networking from a business perspective, you're with like-minded people, and don't forget, you're leveraging their networks as well. If there comes a time where, let's say, there's an environmental matter, or there's a securities matter, or even a matter in California, you know, and someone says, oh, I just met Buzz or Cicera or whatever, and that's a potential for a referral. And they're also a resource. You know, I've got a question. I really would like to ask somebody this, and I'd like to just call up a buddy of mine because I've got this complicated securities question. I wonder if someone else is confronting
That I'm not an expert in.
you know, and so I'm just going to call that person up and say, hey, you got a second? You know, I've run into this. Have you had this situation before? And it's basically getting a little free advice and free insight. And on top of that, I mean, it's visibility for you in whatever context, whether it's in the public context or the private context. You get your name out there. You have the opportunity to write articles and speak on an illustrious panel like this. And you'll find that a lot of these people who end up being just really some of the leaders in the communities, like these two, they happen to be nice people too. So it's actually very pleasant, and it's fun to hang out with friends that you like that are also just, you know, superb lawyers.
And you build your network out of those social interactions.